set this one up. This is actually a really cool bit of tech. Came out in the early 80s, back when they were still trying to figure out digital audio. And back when digital audio could still be stored on analog media. Of course, it still can be today. But yeah, don't know how many of you remember VHS tapes, but
I haven't seen those.
yeah, it's been a hot minute since anyone's used those for anything. But for a very brief period in the 1980s, they were more than just an option for home video. They were actually a medium of storage for digital audio, and that was from the bright minds at Panasonic. This is an old one from Techmoan. Don't know if anybody subscribes to his channel, but it's really good. And whenever he comes across some retro tech, you're in for a bit of a treat. So, let's check this out. This is the Technics SVP100 digital audio on VHS tapes in 1981.
Boy. Behind me here sits an incredibly rare piece of hi-fi technology. This is the SVP100 from Technics. It's the first integrated digital audio cassette recorder, and it records that audio onto standard VHS tapes. The remarkable thing about this is that it came out in spring 1981. That's before the compact disc, a full year and a half before the compact disc in Japan, and
That's
about
incredible.
2 years before the CD came out in the rest of the world. So before you could go in a shop and buy a digital recording on a disc, you could make your own at home on a VHS tape.
That's really quite cool.
When this made its way to the market in 1981, it was a product that was aimed at the hi-fi enthusiast. This brochure shows it as part of a system that's been assembled from other Technics components.
I mean, Technics, to give you some historical context, back in the day, that was one of the high-end brands. If you wanted a home stereo system, you went for Technics, whether it was their speakers, but especially their turntables and their direct drive turntables. They were the gold standard for really, really good turntables.
Important to note here that the only digital music device is that SVP100. The first CD player from Technics would launch a year later. Helpfully, they've itemised the prices of the components shown in this suggested system, and you can see at the bottom here that the whole set, including the cabinet, comes to 1,584,000 yen. So to get a rough idea what that would be today, we put it into a Japanese inflation calculator, which brings it up to over 2 million yen, and then convert that figure into sterling. That shows that it's around £16,000 in today's money, or in US dollars, it's getting on for 20,000. So as you can see, they were
That's what
aiming
20
this
grand got you back in the day.
Holy crap.
That was a fortune even back then.
Holy shit.
a person who might want to spend that kind of money on their hi-fi. But importantly, as you can see in this article from 1981, whilst Mr. Abata from Technics was showing the press a prototype of a CD mechanism, he was also showing a fully functional SVP100. It
almost seems like something to sort of tide you over until the CD player was released.
Clear that Technics believed at the time that these two pieces of tech would complement one another, a tape recorder and a disc player. After all, that's what most people already had in their hi-fi with the record player and cassette deck, so this was just a digital upgrade for the 1980s. Right, let me show you around the machine a bit more. So this whole thing is built like a tank. Well, of course, there's no turret and gun on it, and well, actually not much like a tank, but you know what I mean. It's very solid. Everything that isn't transparent is pretty much made out of metal, and that includes all the buttons and switch gear. Now, around the back, it's a bit...
That's when you know it's high-end, when they don't bother with plastics and things start to get made out of metal, of course. This was the 80s, and they still knew how to build things with quality back then.
Plain, just like a normal cassette deck in many respects. We've got a RCA stereo line level. in and outs. To the right of those are digital in and out, and a few other switches that are held in their most commonly used positions. You've got to remove a piece of plastic if you want to change those. Going back around the front of the machine, we've got a digital tape counter, and we've got the stereo level meters. Now, those can show a peak indicator, which is helpful to let you know the loudest part of a recording. Now, that peak can be reset at any time or switched off, and the stereo level controls allow fine adjustment of the recording level. The transport controls would be familiar to anyone who'd used a tape recorder before. They're feather touch though, and the currently active button is highlighted with an LED. On the front left, next to the headphone output, is a socket that's covered up. That's for an optional wired remote control. While over on the right, we've got
No infrared, just a wired remote. Which for a lot of electronics, even back in the early 80s, that was... a wireless remote was still kind of a rare find. And
left and right microphone inputs, but above those, this whole section really is dominated by this large fader knob. And when this fader's active, it illuminates an LED. That's so you don't accidentally leave it engaged when you don't want to. And of course, again, it's all metal, and it's got a really nice feel and a smooth movement to it. So yeah, you can operate all the basic controls of this machine in the same way previously you would have operated a reel-to-reel tape recorder or a compact cassette, but I'm going to cover a few more of its unique features later on. This is a...
I'm kind of obsessed with the grip on that fader knob. The way it's just been so lovingly machined. It's like carved out of a gigantic lump of aluminium or something. I love it.
A very impressive device in a number of ways. First off, just think about the processing that's required to do real-time digital to analog or analog to digital conversion, depending upon whether it's playing or recording. And then consider the fact that this was demonstrated, a fully functional prototype, at a Japanese hi-fi show in 1980. So the technology that's in here is either from 1980, more like mostly 1979, probably cutting edge stuff for the time. And then consider what your home computer was capable of doing in 1980, how much processing power that had. So to be able to get the amount of power needed to do DAAD conversion in a box this size, very impressive. Now, I say box this size, it's a chunky fella, this. This weighs 21 kilograms, 46 pounds. It's a heavy piece of hi-fi equipment, but you might think the fact that this uses VHS tapes is kind of amusing. You know, why didn't they use something smaller, all that kind of stuff. VHS had only been out 4 years by the time this thing was being demonstrated. It was the best cassette for this company to use, because this is Technics. They're part of the Matsushita group of companies. They're on the VHS side of the format war with Sony and its Betamax on the other side. So that's why they're using this. But there was nothing really better to use. There was nothing smaller at the time that they could have used. And I don't think even if they got a smaller cassette, they'd be able to make this thing any smaller. It's full of cards at the back. I mean, the cassette mechanism's not taking up all that much of the case. I think if you had a smaller cassette, the box would probably still end up being the same size. We'll have a look at it later. A quick look. I'm not going to take the whole thing apart for obvious reasons. One thing I want to mention also, the look of this, very futuristic for when it came out. When it was shown at that Japanese show, it was in a silver finish, and of course that was the hi-fi.
Even today, it still looks like something on the cutting edge.
Colour of the choice of the 70s. But we're moving into the 80s, move to this dark finish. Really, this is kind of demonstrating the look of things to come. It's really quite ahead of its time. In fact, if we just take a look at some video recorders that were around about this time, you'll see what I mean. How this thing really does look like something from the future.
Yeah. A lot of things in the 70s definitely had that silvery chrome type finish, wood accents. And then further on into the 80s, you got everything just went black.
Find some photos of 1980 or 81 video recorders. I went looking back through the various catalogues that have been uploaded on a variety of websites. It's hard to believe that when Technics were showing everyone their SVP 100, you could buy a brand new television in the US that looked like this. Oh, and this was the sole video recorder in the Sears 1980 catalogue. Over in the UK, we had the
JCPenney,
Ferguson
actually.
Video Star. They sold a load of those things. Now, this catalogue, this one was listed online as being from 1980, but I think it's more likely it's 1979, based on the piano key controls on the front of these machines.
Yeah, that was
Those
70s
were
thing.
disappearing by 1980, although lots of people were still buying machines like this around that time. By comparison, Sony's 1980 machine had touch controls, but we're still very much in the era of top loaders with wired remotes. Some of the more
Yeah, growing up, we were so used to the sort of front-loading VHS players, but they didn't start out that way. Most of them start out as top loaders instead. You had a little thing that popped up on top of the VCR, and that's what you slid the tape in, and you just pop it back down and hit play.
futuristic looking models around this time were coming from Panasonic, which isn't surprising because it's the same company as Technics. So I'd imagine that the mechanism in the SVP 100 would share much in common with one of these. But I don't know if you've noticed, every model of video recorder I've shown featured a mechanical tape counter. Now that definitely would have looked out of place on that futuristic Technics machine. It's interesting to see that a lot of the design cues from the SVP 100 were then carried through a couple of years later to Technics' first CD player. That's the SLP-10, which was introduced in 1982. There's a strong family resemblance. Now, Technics had to develop quite a few technologies to enable a mechanism designed for video to work better as one for audio. But that would mean when you put a video cassette in a machine, say from 1980, it's not very accurate about where it starts and stops. You press play and you might be a couple of seconds on before the image comes on the screen, things like that. Well, that was no good for audio tape. This has got a load of additional solenoids in here, mechanisms to manipulate the tape around so that it starts and stops at the same point. So you press play. The tape, of course.
The type of audiophile that would have bought something like this in the early 80s would have been quite particular about that sort of thing. So it makes sense that they would sort of add that in as a feature.
It gets pulled out of the cassette, wrapped around the head. It's a helical scan head, just like in your home machines for video. But when you press stop, you can hear all these things kicking in, all these actuators and stuff, getting the tape back to the point that you press stop, so that next time you press play, it carries on from that point. It's not like a few seconds later. I'd imagine quite a few of the technologies that are developed for this went on to go back into video recorders when we got more accurate ones later in the 80s, especially ones designed for editing and things like that. They also developed a few little technologies to enable you to find your way around the tape. Of course, at the time they were saying that the recording time was 2 hours because that was the length of VHS tape that was available in the NTSC format. But still, if you've got recordings on a 2-hour tape, you want to be able to find them. So they've got a few little buttons and features here that enable you to do that. So I'll give you a bit of a demonstration as to how all that works. The majority of this functionality revolves around these three paddle switches. The one on the right is momentary, while the other two hold their position until they're deactivated. Now, looking at the photos of the 1980 demonstrations, you can see that Technics were making quite a bit of this feature, with blown-up images being shown above the machine. To show how they work, I'll record off my digital music player. It's connected up to the line inputs on the back of the recorder. So pressing the record button brings on the record monitor. This is how you can adjust the levels before even putting the tape into pause. But once you're happy, it's the usual procedure of pressing record and play to engage record pause, and then take off the pause when you want to start recording. You'll notice that the search mark indicator is flashing. It does this for just over a minute whenever you start a new recording. That shows that it's laying down an index mark alongside the audio. You can also manually add one of these marks at any point by pressing that button. The brochure mentions that the digital audio is recorded in the space on the tape that would normally store video, and the index marks, those are stored in the space that would normally record audio. Anyway, I'll just fade this track out.
It's much like old analog film. Back when Hollywood was still using film for a lot of the movie and television productions. There's a space for the image itself, and then off to the side you've got optical tracks for the sound, both the music, the dialogue, everything else. And sometimes that's one or two optical tracks, and then as time went on they started adding in all these things for digital audio and surround sound audio and whatnot. Jedi, thank you so much for the raid. Raiders, welcome in. If it's your first time here, I'm Lord Rexworth. I'm an English nobleman VTuber, and we are reacting to some retro tech. The early stages of digital audio before there was even CDs. So it's going back quite a ways. Well, how was your stream, Jedi? How you doing? Let's get you some shout-outs. You're playing Jump King. I'm told that's the hot game these days, even though it's been out for a while. A lot of people getting back into Jump King. How far were you able to play a multitude of games? Okay, so not just Jump King, other things as well. Well, sounds like you had a fun time. You need to do some after-stream care. Get up and stretch, grab something to eat, something to drink. Totally understand. Oh yeah, thank you so much for the raid.
And then press stop. To find the start of this track, I'm pressing search and rewind. If I'd wanted to find a next index mark on a track, of course I could have pressed search and fast forward. It's just like a picture search on a normal video recorder. It's scanning at 8 times speed, in this case in reverse, until it senses the start of the index mark and then it engages play. By the way, this whole tape mechanism is direct drive and quartz locked. Now the jump mark, well, that's a useful feature if you'd recorded, say, a radio programme and you wanted to skip past the advertisements, or a waffling DJ. Next time you play back the tape, it'll skip whatever section you've marked, and of course it'll do that at 8 times speed, just like
Waffling DJ. I resemble that remark.
The search before. Now if you want to clear any of these index or jump marks, well, you've got to play the tape again, but engage the clear button, and these will be erased in real time as the tape's played through. There's one other quicker way to get to a particular point.
Takes some skill to operate this machine. I mean, I remember having to dub tapes even back in my radio days, and even then we either did not have or did not use anywhere near this level of features. This is quite advanced. This is almost like prosumer level equipment.
Point on a tape, it involves engaging the location.
Yeah.
Really surprised.
No, and Technics excelled at that sort of prosumer grade type equipment. A cassette tape player looks like it takes a VHS tape. Yeah. No, this was released about a year before the compact disc came out, and it was the first real foray into digital audio. The digital audio was printed on a VHS tape, and yeah, this was the medium it was using, was VHS instead of a compact cassette like so many people were used to.
Button that's under the counter. That memorises the counter number that was being displayed at that point, and that number can be recalled with the button on the right and then searched back to at full fast forward or rewind speed. So it's not like a picture search, it's just rewinding the tape until it hits that number. Now if play had been engaged during the search, it would automatically start playing too when the point was reached. Finally, like a lot of tape recorders, it has a timer record button. This will activate the recording function whenever the device is powered on via an external audio timer. So with this product, Technics...
That audio timer looked like one of those ancient retro alarm clocks from the 50s or the 60s.
Were ushering in a new era. The magazine reviews of the SVP100 were extremely positive. Many of the tools they'd used, though, to review tape recorders for years were rendered useless by a digital recorder. With a machine like this, there's no tape hiss and there's no wow and flutter. In addition to these benefits, though, Technics mentioned that recording on this device was going to be more economical than using reel-to-reel tape. So with the SVP100, Technics had a trailblazing machine with great reviews and excellent sound quality. It seemed like the era of digital PCM recording in the home had arrived.
And then the CD player came along and blew everything out of the water.
So why wasn't this successful? Well, it's a simple matter of it being expensive and there being insufficient demand. I mean, it didn't really make much sense to even well-heeled hi-fi enthusiasts at the time. When this came out, remember, a year and a bit before compact disc, so the best things that you could record onto this, the best sound quality, well, what have you got? You got reel-to-reel tape, compact cassette, you got your LPs, FM radio, all of those, in theory, specs-wise, should probably sound worse than this. So you're doing this a disservice. You're putting lower quality audio onto a higher quality device. In fact, the hi-fi magazines at the time they were reviewing this mentioned this fact and said to give this a proper workout, they recorded audio through the microphones on here. Live audio. They got a group of musicians together so they could really see how good this was at replaying audio. I suppose this might have made more sense if you could have bought pre-recorded albums on digital tape. Those might have been an idea, although there was a bit of a problem with that in that, remember, this is really early for VHS, and videotape was really quite expensive. Now, I mentioned that 1981 was early days for VHS, so it seems a bit odd to say that when it came out in 1976, but just to hammer that point home, Radio Shack didn't list any blank videotapes in their catalogue until 1983. But fortunately, Billboard magazine had a feature on blank tape back in 1981, so that's where I was able to get these prices from. The best-selling TDK blank audio cassette in Japan at that point in 1981 was the TDK AD60. That cost the equivalent in US dollars $2.40. The same length of TDK's most popular videotape at this time cost the equivalent of $17. Now that's $50 in today's money with inflation. The problem with recording an album onto a videotape, as well as the price of the blank tape, was also the fact it was all done in real time. That's why movies and things cost so much. So it's likely a pre-recorded PCM album would cost a very similar amount to something like this. But any possibility...
A 1981 VHS music video of Tom Jones, Sir Tom Jones, performing live in Las Vegas cost $59.95 back then. Or in today's money, roughly $179.
Oh.
Incredible how expensive these things were starting out. And then, starting out, yeah. And then we got to the point where you're kind of a peasant if you still had just your VHS player and you didn't have like a DVD player or something like that. Because there was that brief stint where it's like, oh, what are you doing watching VHS tapes like a brokey when you could have this fancy Laserdisc player like us Richie Rich types. Don't know if anybody remembers Laserdisc. No? Nobody?
I think I'm a little young for that.
Yeah. That's how old I am.
I did use a VCR all the way up until 2012, though.
Oh. Yeah. Sounds about... I think that's about the time when VCR started dying out and they stopped making stuff on VHS.
Yeah, I just stopped using the VCR because it kept eating the VHS tapes.
Yeah. Yeah, after a while, mechanism would just fail.
Of pre-recorded digital music tapes quickly evaporated in 1982 once CD entered the scene. Pressing a CD was a heck of a lot cheaper than dubbing a tape. Okay, I'd just like to give you a bit of a brief potted history of digital PCM, pulse code modulation, starting at the beginning, getting up to the point when this came out, of course only jumping through and pointing out some of the highlights. So invented in the 1930s in the US by Bell Laboratories. However, that patent was tied up, sealed really, till 1976 because that technology had been used to encrypt phone lines that went from London to the Pentagon at the end of World War II. So
that's why we were stuck with vinyl records, reel-to-reel tapes, and compact cassettes for the longest time. Because PCM digital audio was state secrets.
That's when it was invented, but you can kind of put that to one side, really, because this story more starts...
Yes. Including the internet, which was, for the longest time, military access only.
Wasn't it intranet at that point?
Yeah, it was mostly just different computers from different military laboratories and bases just talking to each other. Mm. And that was it. That was the internet back then.
That's in the late 60s, when we've got the big broadcasters, the BBC in the UK and NHK in Japan, both working on technologies involving digital PCM. The BBC were looking at ways of using it to transmit video and audio from a remote location, and over in Japan, NHK were looking at ways to create a digital PCM recorder, and they did. They came up with one that was a big old box of stuff using a broadcast quality videotape recorder. I think it had like 2-inch wide tape on it. They then leased this out, and a company that got it from them was Columbia Nippon, who we more commonly refer to as Denon, although it's a group of companies that includes Denon on the electronics manufacture side, and also record labels as well. So,
to their credit, NHK is still, to this day, working on advances in video and audio technology. I think the most recent breakthroughs they've had is not just experiments with 8K levels broadcasting, but going as high as 16K.
Isn't that a little excessive?
I mean, it is, but also that's kind of the point for their labs, to sort of stretch the limits to see just how far they can take things, just how high can they go with high def.
True enough.
They got this piece of equipment from NHK to study it, to have a look at it, see how it worked, take it all apart, probably put it back together again, and then they came up with their own, and then they very quickly came up with a revised version of that, a more compact one, still used commercial videotape recorder equipment to store the audio, but they called this the Denon DN023R. It was compact enough to be transported to various locations to record performances, and indeed some of the recordings that they made in that period were released as early as 1972.
Right to Rough and Elegance. J. Inagaki, the Grand Spaceship Orchestra, arranged by H. Suzuki. Oh, interesting.
On vinyl record. The quality, it just shows, was good enough at that point to release on a record. So let's move to 1977. That's when Sony brought out the PCM-1. This is a standalone processor. So this doesn't include any videotape recorder. It's just the processor. You had to connect it up to a video cassette recorder, either a Betamax or a U-matic. Now, again, Sony weren't really too happy with this early edition and were quickly updating it, but this was a 13-bit machine, a sampling rate of 44.056 kilohertz. That 13-bit, though, they use 3-line quantization, which brought it up to 14-bit. So really it was a 14-bit machine. Now, at the same time, in Japan, the Electronics Industry Association of Japan, the EIAJ, got a group of companies together because they wanted to become world leaders in the field of home digital recording. And they got them to agree on a standard. Now, ideally, they said that 16-bit would be the best system, but it was very expensive and they weren't sure that anyone will be able to produce this on a consumer level. So,
as long as I can remember, it's always been 16-bit is the standard for PCM sound. I know that was the big thing that was marketed when the Sega CD came out. It was one of the first real forays into putting video games on a CD-ROM, and one of the big advantages, you could have CD quality sound, like full orchestral sound if you wanted it. And secret with a lot of Sega CDs, you could actually put them into a standard CD player, and once you get past the first track, everything else is just all music. I always thought that was rather cool.
They came up with two standards. There was 16-bit for professional use, but 14-bit for the home. The reason that they separated those two out, I've got some prices here. I think these are from 1978. At this point, Sony had come out with the PCM-100, a much better machine. That was 14-bit though, and that cost $15,000, the equivalent of in yen. They had a 16-bit machine as well, Sony, the PCM-1600. That cost $40,000. So 16-bit, $40,000. 14-bit, 15,000. So you can see
that back then that was like high-end Mercedes, Rolls-Royce type money. That's incredible.
Massive difference
between
between
many people making that much money to be like, man, just got all this money sitting around. What should I spend it on?
You had to be in the music or radio or television broadcasting business, or you just had to be loaded back then. And even then, we're talking about pre-internet days, not a lot of people would know this sort of thing exists. So, You also had to be a bit of an industry insider to know that these things even existed before you could possibly get your hands on them.
But also, just consider that this comes out in 1981, $3,000. That's a massive drop. And remember that those Sony machines, those were processors. You had to stick your own video recorder on top of that. So this is an all-in-one device, $3,000. So yeah, expensive at the time, but a massive drop from what had come out earlier. But yeah, this adheres to that EIAJ standard, which was decided upon in the late 70s. So it's 14-bit is 44.056 kilohertz. But yeah, 14-bit as opposed to 16-bit for CD. But truthfully, to my ears, this 14-bit machine, I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I was imagining there'd be some kind of harshness to it, or a metallic edge or something a little bit odd about it. But no, to me, this 14-bit one, it sounds perfect.
I guess the other 2 bits are just sort of imperceptible to a lot of ears.
Okay, I promised that we'd have a quick look inside, but don't get your hopes up too much, because without
let's
engaging
take a look
in a
at the guts of this
potentially
thing.
damaging disassembly, there's very little you can see in here due to it being so densely packed together.
It's almost like a rack mount server inside.
It's really just a sandwich of boards with a cassette mechanism at the front and a power supply section at one end. You can also make out the 2 large solenoids that are on top of the cassette mechanism. The service manual explains what all those boards are. You can always pause to have a read at that, but the best look at the main board comes from the brochure, and on there you can see that that's dominated by a few very large chips. At the time, a couple of these were amongst the most advanced large-scale integration semiconductors yet produced. But that's really all that I can show you. It's a heavy box packed with loads of stuff, and it's a bit of a miracle that it all still works. When you've got a new product category like this, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to know who your true customers are. I mean, Technics were aiming this at hi-fi enthusiasts, well-heeled hi-fi enthusiasts.
Well-heeled, loaded hi-fi enthusiasts. I mean, $3,000 even back then. That was a fortune.
On the other side of the fence, we've got Sony with their range of PCM processors. They were aiming those at musicians, people with home recording studios. And it seems that that approach was the right one at the time. They sold a load of those things, particularly the PCM F1, which was a portable device that could be used with a portable Betamax recorder. I'll show you one of those in a future episode. But they sold a load of those things. And as far as these things go, well, I don't think they sold very many of them at all. It was only on the market for a couple of years before it disappeared. Now, you might have noticed the digital input and output on the back of here. They just look like the standard ones you might get on, say, a mini disc for recording digital audio from a CD player, or perhaps on the back of a CD player for sending off to an external DAC or something like that. You might not have given them a second thought. We're so used to seeing them nowadays. It's not something you'd really notice particularly. But then you've got to consider when this came out. The CD player wasn't on the market. You couldn't connect the input up to any digital device. And then what comes out of the output? Where does that go? What are you supposed to use that for? Well, trying to figure all that out led me down an interesting rat hole. So the first thing I tried to do was to record a CD over that coax connector. My DVD player's got a coax digital output, and of course I plugged that into the input on the back of here. I also connected up the stereo line level outputs as well, and a button on the front of the machine switches between the two. Now, while the line level was coming through fine, the digital, unsurprisingly, wasn't recognised by the recorder. So I just assumed it was some kind of different standard. So I took a look at the brochures to see what they suggested the digital socket should be used for. Now, this 1981 setup that preceded the CD doesn't show them connected to anything. And unfortunately, the 1982 brochure that did include a CD doesn't show a wiring diagram.
So it's a connector, but you can't really connect it to anything. Yeah, it doesn't do anything.
It's like they had a product in mind and then they scrapped it. So you just got this product they've released with a feature that does nothing.
Possibly. I mean, it happened. It wasn't too uncommon, even back then. But, yeah. Strange little mystery there.
However, I do have a Japanese instruction sheet with mine, and that shows something curious. The first suggestion on here is to connect two of these machines together to make digital dubs. Well, that of course makes sense. But then we move on to 2, 3 and 4. And those show that you can link the digital in and out from the SVP100 to an NV9600. Now that's a U-matic video recorder, which is a bit odd because that's a big old chunky machine with no digital capabilities. It also shows the digital out from the SVP100 being connected to the video in on that recorder. So that means that it's sending a video signal out of some sort. And of course, remember from earlier how the index signals are stored in the audio portion and the digital audio is in the video section of the tape. Well, that means that we should be able to see the digital audio. So let's find out. So I connected the socket labelled digital out on the back of the Technics to a composite input on a monitor and got this nice sharp black and white signal. So let's see what happens when the audio starts.
Like a videotape version of an optical track on film.
So there you go, that's what the audio looks like as a video. However, things took a bit of a turn for the weird when I played that tape back in a normal video recorder. Now I expected to see the same video and hear the index tone that was recorded on the audio.
Someone would do for what?
An ARG.
I don't think I know what that is.
Basically when like different puzzles and clues are put into these videos.
Yeah.
Like Game Theory used to cover a lot of them.
I
don't remember what it stands for though. My brain is not working properly right now. Hold on.
That's all right. I think I get the basic idea. It's almost like sort of the basic plot point behind what, The Ring or something, where they had that cursed VHS tape.
Not quite. It stands for Alternate Reality Game, an interactive narrative experience that uses the real world as a platform to deliver a story through multiple media formats such as websites, social media, videos, audio files, and real world tasks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think there was a game called The Majestic or something like that that was very similar. Ended support a long time ago, but it was kind of cool the way it was described.
Video section of the tape, and you can hear that, and it sounds like a very quick woodpecker. But oddly, that's not all you can hear. Yeah, that's a distorted version of the music, and that won't be digital audio. For some reason, the music has seeped through to the analog audio track as well. Now, just to see if that had anything to do with the hi-fi capabilities of this particular video recorder, I tried the tape again in a non-hi-fi VHS machine, but the weird audio track remained. Presumably the fact there's an analog audio track of sorts is a remnant of reusing existing video recorder circuitry, but it was still a bit of a surprise. So yeah.
Sort of leads you to wonder, is it genuine digital audio then?
It kind of makes sense being labelled digital because you're sending the digital audio from one device to another, but you're sending it as composite video. Really, it's a composite video output, although a modified one. I think it's just black and white, very sharp, designed for sending that digital data as cleanly and efficiently as possible from one device to another without any dropouts or interference. Of course, you can't play a normal videotape in here. It doesn't do anything at all. It's just designed for showing the data and sending it from one device to another. So if the data's not there in the video section of the tape, it just doesn't show anything. But yes, it's a video output and a video input for linking two of these devices together so you can do perfect digital dubs. I'm sure seeing a VHS tape in a video talking about hi-fi would prompt a lot of people to think of VHS hi-fi, the addition to the VHS spec that came along in 1984. Over the years, a lot of people have suggested this to me as a topic that I should cover in a video. I've never really thought that it would warrant a full video though, so let's cover it off here. So yeah, very high quality audio, almost up to CD quality at times. It was not a digital system, though. It used frequency modulation, but apparently I don't think it really mattered whether you recorded in long play or standard play. The quality was roughly the same, and therefore it was ideal for time-shifting audio or for radio programs, for example, which a lot of people have suggested to me as to that's what they used it for. They connect their video recorder up to their hi-fi, and they'd use the built-in timer to record programs when they weren't there. And of course you can record a lot longer in one go unbroken on a videotape than you can on a compact cassette. The specs, I'll just talk about those because it's an analog system, so different to this, and of course it came along a few years later. Frequency response of VHS hi-fi, 20 Hz up to 20 kHz, whereas this goes from 20 kHz at the top, the same, but at the bottom end goes down to 2 Hz. Signal.
Okay, starting to get off into the weeds with this one, but I think we get the idea. So, giving that a
seems
like.
Very niche.
Yeah, super niche. Like, so niche, it's little wonder it only lasted a few years. And supplanted by superior tech with the CD player.
As you do.
Right, there's another tab cleared out.